Senator, it's good to see you again here on the program. Experts questioned early on Senate Bill 12 and House Bill 20, questioning whether it would stand up to court scrutiny. In the end, courts have questions about it. Looking back, do you think that maybe it was a mistake to pass this?
This is a huge issue because everybody faces this when they go online and you get put in Facebook jail or you get blocked or deplatformed, and they can't even tell you why in many cases. So it's a huge issue because social media is the new town square. It's where people go. So it had to be addressed. And so we knew going into this that we were going to have some opposition, and big tech fought us every step of the way. They're still fighting. They do not want discovery to go forward in this case, because if discovery happens, sending written questions and getting documents, if discovery takes place and the American people see just how bad it's been, just who they're blocking and why, and their motives and their internal processes, that's their worst nightmare. That's why they sued us day one with a facial challenge to block this law. So the Supreme Court punted. They sent it back to the Fifth Circuit.
Right.
Florida has a similar bill. They sent that one back to the 11th Circuit, but this was just round one, and so we're still in the game.
The conservative justices seem concerned that Texas law might violate the First Amendment. Is there a better way you could have crafted it to get it past judicial scrutiny?
So the crux of the case is, are these social media platforms common carriers, right? You know what that
Right.
means.
Sure.
Telephone company can't cut you off because of your religion. You don't get your lights cut off because of your politics, your free speech. And so Justice Thomas, Justice Alito, Justice Gorsuch, those three on that wing of the court, they agree that common carrier is the correct analysis. The other Republicans aren't sure about that. And then the Democrats are kind of split on the issue. But yes, a unanimous court said the case needs to go back to the Fifth Circuit to take another look. So yeah, the crux of this case was, if they're common carriers, even though they're private companies, if they're common carriers, like the phone company, then they have to treat everyone the same. And even though they're a private company, they don't have a license to discriminate. Ironically, they're trying to wrap themselves in the First Amendment. They're claiming free speech is a right to censor everybody else, and that's not how it works. So if ultimately the court rejects this common carrier argument, then we'll come back with another one, because this has got to be dealt with.
You'll come back next session with another piece of legislation?
You bet. We'll carefully read the final opinion, see what concerns they have, see what problems they have, and we'll draft something else. So we're not going to stop. This affects too many people. And you know this, the stories you do, they're discussed on social media so many times. That's the new town square. They really are common carriers for all intents and purposes. They're like the toll bridge, the only way to cross the gorge. They're like the railroad used to be. You can hike the Oregon Trail or you can take the railroad. Those are really not equal substitutes. They have so much control. They're common carriers, and they need to be held accountable for that. So we believe we're going to win in the end.
Senator, what do you think a review by lower courts, by the Fifth Circuit again, what do you think it's going to come up with? Because they've already looked at this.
It's interesting. So the Supreme Court said that the Fifth Circuit and the 11th Circuit in the Florida case, Florida bill was similar to ours. The Supreme Court said they used the wrong standard. And so you know these things well, and I'm getting too technical, but a facial challenge means if they're going to challenge this law on its face, they've got to prove that in every possible application of the law, in virtually every possible application, it's unconstitutional. And that's a real heavy burden. The Supreme Court even said in this ruling that big tech is gloating about, but in the ruling, they said facial challenges are very hard. The standard is very high. So big tech has got to go back and prove that every application of this bill is a problem. And that's a heavy burden. We don't think they can do that. The right way would have been to do an as applied challenge. They're saying, as this law is applied to us, it's unconstitutional. Here's why. But they didn't do that because they wanted to cut off the case and stop that discovery process. So I believe the Fifth Circuit now is going to go back and look at it. Because this bill covers a lot. It covers social media. It covers when Gmail blocks your emails because you're a Republican. It covers all these things that these major platforms do. YouTube, the videos they block, the videos they let you see. There are so many things this bill does. And the Supreme Court says the Fifth Circuit's got to go back and look at every one of those applications. So this is going to take a while. And we look forward to that process because the American people are going to see just what big tech has been doing, and they're not going to like it.
Let's zoom out and talk about the next legislative session come January here. Top two issues facing lawmakers. What do you think they are?
The border continues to be just indescribable, right? We've had a border crisis for so long, we don't even know what to call it now. Now, you know
But
what?
but but you
Go
know,
ahead.
there are fewer people coming across right now. You think the border is still paramount?
Well, what Texas is doing is working. You've seen that. There are fewer people crossing in Texas. They're going to Arizona. They're going somewhere else. So that's obviously, we got to keep doing what we're doing. We're finally getting ahead of that one. And then property taxes, right? We had a significant property tax cut last session. We have to keep doing that. Man, with this inflation, we have to do everything we can to help people, real people who are trying to buy groceries and trying to pay their bills. So those are obviously going to be huge issues. ESG, you recall that fight where big tech firms are targeting Texas oil and gas. And when they do that, when they try to shut down oil and gas, they're costing us good jobs in Texas and they're raising the price of energy. Again, all these policies affect real people, working families. They're the ones whose light bills get too high, who can't afford to put gas in their car. So we're going to be working on those again, obviously. And I'll tell you something else. The threat from communist China is becoming a lot more serious. There's a federal role here, but the states have a role as well. We know that the Communist Chinese Party is aggressively stealing higher education, stealing technology from higher ed. We know that our electric grid could be in jeopardy, our election system, our power, again, water, wastewater, all of these things that we rely on. We have this free, open society, which we must have, and we're vulnerable. And so there's growing evidence that the Chinese Communist Party, not Chinese people, not the people, but the Chinese Communist Party ruling that country, they're our enemies, and they're very serious about this. And if they get
What kind of
Taiwan,
legislation could, I'm sorry, Senator, what kind of legislation could the legislature pass, though, to address that?
thank you so much. Texas already passed the first bill in the country dealing with higher ed and protecting our research at higher ed. Because again, serious technology that's used for energy, for defense, all the kind of things that we need are developed at our universities. And there are
Yeah.
Chinese students and professors who are aggressively trying to steal it. Their families are being threatened back home. And so we passed a bill that says we're going to take a step about that. Florida passed a similar bill. And then ownership of land. We shouldn't have land near military bases, critical infrastructure owned by folks from nations that are hostile to us. And again, we're talking about a group of nations like China that are on the list maintained by the State Department that are aggressively against the US. So protecting critical infrastructure like that, those are the kind of things we're talking about.
And you mentioned property taxes as well. What do you have in mind there? A further cut to the homestead exemption?
That's the idea. You know, over the last two sessions, we finally got the increase slowed down quite a bit. And then last session, for the first time, a decrease. We stopped them from growing so fast, and then we were able to decrease them. This session, we're looking at another good budget surplus because the people of Texas are working hard, the economy's strong, and so a lot of that needs to go for more property tax relief. So yes, reducing those property taxes some more. So those are obviously going to be big deals that people care about and need to get done next session.
Senator, you authored the heartbeat bill in the state here too. There's a push among some Republicans nationwide and in Congress especially to ban in vitro fertilization. Do you expect the Texas legislature would consider something like that next year?
I don't. You know, every time we passed a pro-life bill over the last 20 years in Texas, that includes the heartbeat bill that I carried, every pro-life bill we have passed has specifically carved out in vitro fertilization. That's people who are trying to have children. And so there are always going to be developments on how it's done ethically. Those are always going to come up. But a ban on in vitro fertilization will not be going anywhere. I don't know if anyone's going to file one, but don't expect that to move anywhere in the Texas legislature. I will say we carried a bill last session to make it clear that when a mom has a medical emergency, when her life is threatened, when she has a major bodily function that's in jeopardy because of a problem pregnancy, that mom does have the option of going forward with an abortion if she wants to. We've always put that in Texas law, but you've seen the stories. There have been some physicians and some hospitals that were not allowing that, even when a mom had an ectopic pregnancy. Little baby's not going to make it, and then the mom's in jeopardy. And some doctors and hospitals were refusing to treat even that. We passed a bill last year to make it clear in an ectopic pregnancy, in a situation like that, if the mom's life is in danger or health's in danger, then that's an exception, and everybody's for that. We may need to further clarify the law in Texas on that. Again, we are for protecting those little babies and protecting those moms, and we can do both. So you may see legislation about that next session.
Yeah, let me ask you about that because there are some doctors who are afraid that they'll be prosecuted under the Texas law if they decide to conduct an abortion for a mom whose life is in jeopardy. What type of tweaks do you see to that?
Well, the law already says if the mom's life is in danger or if there's a threat to a major bodily function. And we've had that same medical exception for over a decade. It's always been there. But after Roe versus Wade went away, hospital administrators, hospital lawyers, I guess lawyers that represent doctors got really nervous. And some hospitals and doctors are spooked. And so we passed a bill, House Bill 3058, last session to further clarify that. And that we may need to do that again, because if the mom's life is in danger, the life of the mother has always been an exception in Texas. You can go back to the Texas abortion laws from the 1800s, and the life of the mother has always been protected, always been that exception. So yes, so we may need to clarify that language just to make sure. We don't want to give doctors or hospitals any excuse not to help those moms in those situations.
Senator, last question. I've been trying to take a straw poll from lawmakers I'm talking to about school vouchers. Do you think there are enough votes now to pass school vouchers in the Texas legislature?
I do. I do. You know, the Texas Senate has passed school choice probably a half a dozen times. Before I got to the Senate passed it and passed it a number of times since I've been there. And I believe the votes are there. And we love our public schools in Texas. We're thankful for them. That's where most people are going to go. Most people are happy there. They're not the perfect fit for every child, for every family. So just makes sense to give parents choices. I believe that will pass next session. And it's worked well in other states. It's been good for students. Public schools have even gotten better and even gotten stronger in other states where they've done it. And we're going to do it right.
Senator, it's good to see you again. Thank you for the time.
Thanks for having me.